Hello one, hello all, it's the gothiest ghost of them all, Caspa in the flesh, and it's time for a review of Moor Mother, the Great Bailout. Moor Mother is a Philadelphia rapper, poet, spoken word, activist, and this is her latest album. And she has put out numerous solo albums and quite a handful of collab albums, which I've absolutely loved, be it Brass with Billy Woods, be it True Opera with Mental Jewelry, which was a maniacal, no-wave, noise rock album, which absolutely kicked ass and which I personally felt was one of the best rap meets noise rock albums I've probably ever heard. But her solo work unfortunately has not really done it for me, although I do respect how out there she is, how diverse she is, how she's willing to take risks. So I wasn't really expecting something I would love, although I've always been interested into what she was going to do next. And on this one, she has really nailed it here. She's really knocked it out the park, to say the least. Because this thing is beautifully produced while simultaneously bringing the most haunting, disturbing imagery and vocals and production I've probably ever heard all year. It's very murky, it's very foreboding, and with the subject matter here, it's not really hard to see why, as this album reflects on slavery, colonialism, and it's not a large track list, but there are some very lengthy tracks on here, such as the opener with veteran soul singer Lonnie Holly doing some very passionate vocals on here, and with him and Moor Mother collabing on his last fantastic album, it's really no surprise that he would be on this, especially given the subject matter that is presented here. Now, as far as elements go, we're getting glitch, we're getting jazz, we're getting poetry, electroacoustic. It's very hazy, it's very gloomy, it's very haunting, and the production reminds me of electronic producers like Prurient or Tim Hecker, or heavy droning tones like you would hear on a Sun record. And there's also the 8-minute South Sea, which has probably the oddest production on the whole album, but yet the most traumatizing lyrics on this whole album, with a lot of bizarre vocals, with dog-like panting, humming, melodic moans, mouth pops, chomping, whistles that follow these jazzy set of somber horns that later become entrancing, with these psychedelic organs and horns just swirling around each other, as Moor Mother is portraying these harrowing visions of being on a slave boat, being in a pure state of horror, not knowing who's alive, who's dead, infants being snatched from their mother's womb, with devastatingly tragic lyrics, like how many have to die before you choke on your own tears, and your brain convincing you that you're already dead. And I'm not really going to spoil this whole thing for you because it is a tragic story, but the narrative is very important, and it's very bone-chilling as well. So I feel what Moor Mother is dishing out here is very rebellious, very political, but also nightmarish at the same time. This is a rebellious nightmare and immensely disturbing. Prime example would be Compensated, Emancipation, with these passionate, soulful vocals as Moor Mother is delivering these straightforward, deadpan vocals that develop into these quivering, frantic, harrowing deliveries. And what you get on this track is really a taste of what you could expect throughout. Granted, not every track on here does sound the same, but the eeriness and the narrative stays absolutely focused throughout. And there's not to say there is not versatility on here, there certainly is. You do get tracks with a bit of percussion on it that deviates from the drumless tracks, as some of these have dismal ambient production that sounds like a poltergeist in the past, that sounds trapped in jazzy atmospheric production, like on the track All the Money. But as I mentioned before, there is a bit of beauty that is in this album, beauty in the heroism, but of course it needs that to balance out the very horrifying imagery that it lays to you in this album. Like the opener, as I alluded to earlier, which is the longest track on this album, that has these somber, dreamy strings, twinkling melodies, and beautiful backing vocals with passionate bellowing vocals from Lonnie Holley, as these lyrics depict traumatic visions of slavery and years of suffering with long-lasting effects, and how the history of suffering from the PTSD and the knowing of the systematic oppression, which absolutely does go on today, but it is also important to pass this on to the youth. That way they have the knowledge of knowing this history exists and this is the situation that people of color are put in, but on a grander scale to prevent this type of thing from ever happening again. And I love how Moor Mother comes in with these stern vocals, with these creepy whispers of saying, guilty, guilty, guilty. And All the Money, which has these disturbingly haunting backing vocals that are so ghostly. It sounds like they're weeping across the track. It's like a horror movie with these slow trickling keys and pounding drums. Also, I love how sinister and demonic the whispered vocals are, that almost border on black metal just a little bit, while simultaneously addressing the horrendous exploitations of slave labor and the exploitation of the sweat off the backs of migrants who are also being deported, denied of citizenship, as Moor Mother is asking, where'd all the money come from? Where'd all the money come from? Putting so much pressure on this track that would make those who are making these horrendous actions sweat. It's like a nightmarish interrogation. As far as up-tempo tracks go, you're probably not gonna get that here, but I could say the closest thing to it that you would get is God Save the Queen, with these skittering rhythms and blaring saxes just arpeggiating through the mist of this production. It's so nocturnal, it's so linear, with these backing vocals and Moor Mother's disturbing vocals on here, going, God save the Queen, as Moor Mother is sending shots to the Queen and her fascism, while simultaneously addressing this in a, I would say, satirical questioning, I would say, with these dark satirical statements while simultaneously questioning the Queen and her tyranny. Also on this album, I have to address the super heavy poeticism that Moor Mother brings here, like on Compensated Emancipation. Now, this album is not exactly loud and abrasive throughout. You do get your pained wailing vocals, dark droning chords, but the lyrics really have the visceral intensity and savagery and graphic nature that really gives this album more of a nightmarish experience. As if the production didn't already do that, Moor Mother lyrically brings it out on here, with lyrics like, why am I here, reading this, I paid to be here, blood money out of the cotton pants, made myself a ship out of Andrew Jackson's 100 racist 5 horses of wool. And probably the most hair-raising track on the album, Death by Longitude, with these demonic reversed vocals that sound straight out of a horror movie, with the squealing feedback on production that intensifies as the lyrics progress, as Moor Mother again expresses the narrative and horrifying nature of slavery, of how slaves are dehumanized and demonized for profit and have bounties put on their heads, and how all the deaths, all the casualties are a result of white supremacy, and Moor Mother using this as a disclaimer. Meanwhile, the track Liverpool Wins has these jazzy backing vocals with these violently slammed organ chords, which reflects on the harsh realities of slavery and the rich not being held accountable for their horrific actions, and colonizing and enforcing religion all through white supremacy, which indeed has been something people have been expressing for a long time, like how before there was really no Christianity, it kind of just came through slavery. So yeah, this is a very deep album, this is a very heavy album. It's truly an album that's not going to be for everybody. As far as gripes go, I don't really have too many. Maybe some short tracks on here, like the last track on here that doesn't really serve the narrative, I don't think. But other than that, I think this album is very heavy. It's very disturbing, but yet very informative at the same time. It's definitely a reflection on a horrific time, which I truly hope never happens again. And due to the times of fascism that is happening now, this album is definitely important, and I think it's done in a very creative way. I think Moor Mother did a fantastic job of picking out the most grim production possible. I think Moor Mother delivers some of the most grotesque, most haunting lyrics she's probably ever laid on a track. And it just makes for an incredible album. And definitely Moor Mother's best album yet. I'm feeling the blackest 4 to 4.5 out of 5 black hearts on this album. But that's just what I think. What did you think? Did you love this album? Did you hate this album? Why? And that's it. Caspa, Gothic Ghost, Moor Mother, The Great Bailout. Till we meet again.